Welcome back to episode 3 of the Just God Pod. I am joined today by another one of my mentors. He used to be my head baseball coach. He is the head baseball coach at East Carolina University. Coach Godwin. Coach, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Carter. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it is. It's an honor to have you on. Before we get into anything, I want to give a big shout out to this show's sponsor, Mr. Mike Aman and his company, Greater Purpose Company, whose mission is to equip and empower business leaders to build great businesses for a greater purpose. You know Mike Aman pretty well, so before we dive into your story, I want to sort of hear about your relationship with Mike and Paige Aman.
Well, Mike specifically, walked into my life officially about a week after the season was over in 2020 with COVID, and told me that he was worried about me. So he walked in my office and he had a John Maxwell Leadership Bible, and we sit there and connected. I don't remember exactly how long, probably an hour plus, and basically he said, if you need an accountability partner when you're reading your Bible and you want to journal, I'll be more than happy to be your guy. And we had more time on our hands during that time because we're not playing during the baseball season. So I started reading the Bible more and journaling and sending it via email to Mike. And Mike and I have continued our relationship, and I always tell Paige, thanks for sharing Mike Aman with me. And about a month after he walked into my office, my grandmother passed away on April 18th. And my mom had asked me to speak at the funeral, and I said, absolutely not. I'll be too emotional and I don't want to do it. And Mike helped me navigate that. And we just continued to walk, I say together, really, Mike holding my hand more so than me walking with Mike. And you talked about it in your podcast with Webb, but you have to have mentors in your life. And Mike has really helped me navigate a lot of tough things over those past 4 years, from Nico Agnos passing away to, one of our players getting suspended for a year, Parker Bird situation, me getting COVID a bunch, dealing with the new landscape of college athletics. He's just helped me be more grounded. And it starts with, and he would tell you that it's just God working through him to help me. And I hope I can do that for at least one other person on this planet at some point in time. And that's the thing that we all need to worry about more than winning a baseball game.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you did leave out. Uh, I think it was the day of the banquet. We had some guys get baptized, and Webb and Jamin baptized some of my teammates and some of the players. But Mike Aman baptized you. Can you kind of touch on that moment and what that was like for you guys?
So I had never been in church, physically for 10 years that I've been the head coach here. And of course, all the excuses the devil gives you for me, it was I didn't want to talk about baseball when I walked into a church. So that was an easy out for me. And I had, of course, a bunch of friends that had encouraged me to go. And I just can be hard headed at times, as you know, Carter. And just like, no, yeah, I just don't want to deal with that. And on Christmas Eve last year, we're coming up on a year. I walked into Open Door Church with Blake Hardigree and Sarah and Graham when we dropped Graham off at the nursery.
Yeah,
But I sat because I needed somebody to walk in there with me, and I thank Blake and Sarah for that. And so went 3 consecutive Sundays, and on the third one, I actually walked in by myself, but Blake and Sarah sat next to me, and Blake had told me about the players getting baptized, but I didn't want the players to think I was, forcing that on them, or I was getting baptized because of them. But I just looked at Blake and I said, "Hey, I want to get baptized, and I think I want to do it on the field with our guys." And I nudged him, and Blake like dropped his phone. I think he broke his phone in church that day because he was so excited. And then the next week, Blake said, "Well, who are you going to get to baptize you?" And I go, I really hadn't thought about that. I said, but if I'm going to get baptized, Mike Aman's going to be the guy.
yeah,
So then I called Mike, and of course, Mike obliged, and it was an awesome moment. And, just a really cool moment. As much time as we spend at the baseball field, to be able to do that on the baseball field, especially at Clark LeClaire Stadium, was awesome.
yeah. That place certainly is home for you, and that day and that moment was special. And I remember that. I mean, I feel like that kind of spread like wildfire throughout the community. I mean, people found out about the baseball team getting baptized, and next thing, all of a sudden, I'm getting DMs from church, like local churches, about like the mass amount of numbers of people getting baptized at church on Sunday, which was obviously that is exactly what called or what God calls us to do as His disciples. So that was certainly a special moment, and I remember Blake he came up to me at the field. I think it was on Monday after you guys went to church on Sunday, and you told him, and he was like, "Did you hear the news?" And like he couldn't stop smiling, and I'm like, "What? Like what is going? Like are you having another kid? Like what's going on here?" And he was like, "No, Coach Godwin wants to get baptized," and he was so fired up about it, and that was a special moment, obviously for you and Blake. But Blake is another person that in my life, and I know in your life, was he transformed us, and I don't think he gets enough credit for the job he did and for what he really did for ECU baseball. Not only just the operations side of things, but also just like in our lives. Like Blake Hardigree truly was a special human being. If you wanted to sort of expand on that.
Yeah, who would have thought in the whatever it was, the summer of 19, that this young guy that looked like he was 13 years old would be the director of baseball operations at East Carolina, and really turn into not just a really good friend of mine, but a mentor, and a guy that knows the Bible well. I would say him and Heath Blackman on our staff probably know the Bible better than any baseball coaches I've ever been around.
Yeah.
But Blake, to walk with me through a lot of darkness and get emotional because how much the guy means to me and how much his family means to me. And
Yeah.
um, he saw a lot of things that nobody else saw, and he never judged me, and he would help me walk through it, and I just appreciate that. And um, lifelong friend, we still go get coffee on Friday mornings when we can at 7 a.m. just to catch up. And the fact that him and his family still want to stay in Greenville, even though they're not a part of our baseball program every day, is amazing. And just the impact Greenville community's had on them to want them to stay when Blake's from Amarillo, Texas, and
Yeah.
Sarah's from Omaha. So
Yeah.
that's pretty amazing, and I'm just so thankful and so grateful for them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's one of a kind, him and Sarah, and then obviously their baby boy Graham, and they actually have one on the way. So congrats to the Hardigrees. You touched on Heath Blackman as well, and obviously Blake being a part of the program. And I'm fortunate enough, and I'm honestly just blessed enough to actually join the coaches Bible study that we do every Monday morning. And I remember joining the first one. I had no idea what we were talking about, what we were going to go through, didn't know what to expect. But Heath likes to start off with one thing you're grateful for this past week, and I think Henry Lartigue, the hitting coach, went first, and then Losner went next, and then it got to me. And I honestly, I was just like, I'm just thankful that I'm in this room right now, that I'm around coaches that are taking time out of their day to get into the Word. And I said, if you were to tell me when I first stepped on campus that three years later I would be joining the coaches Bible study, I would have been like, one, I don't think a coach's Bible study would ever be a thing at East Carolina, and two, I certainly wouldn't be part of it as a former player. And so that moment right there was like, wow, that is incredible. I just want to thank all the coaches at East Carolina for doing that. I did want to kind of go into like why you guys started that. Why is it important for you guys to have a Bible study every Monday morning?
Well, I'm getting older. I don't remember specifically how it came to fruition, but I know it might have been Heath just walking in and going, "Hey, what do you think about a staff Bible study?"
Yeah,
And for me to go, "Yeah, that sounds great." But I'm sure Heath and Blake were behind it in some capacity. But
yeah,
to get, the majority of our coaches here every Monday morning
yep,
in my
yeah,
office, either at 8 a.m. or 8:30, and even last spring to go through the whole spring, whether we won or lost on Sunday or the weekend, and still get it. I mean, it helps us all start the week off with the most important thing, and that's our faith. And
yeah,
I'm so thankful that he takes on that responsibility. That's not why we hired him when I hired him as director of player development, but sometimes you find stuff out about people in a positive way like this, and he actually taught religion at Hickory Grove Christian. So um, he is very knowledgeable about the Bible, but we go through different devotions, go through the Word, and pray for people that are in need, of course. But it's been awesome for us as a staff, and as you know, I mean, the kids see it, and we don't force religion on anybody. We just give them an opportunity if it's something they want to grow in. And you say this a lot, but you got to meet people where they are. I think Christianity gets a bad rap by times when people are preaching to them all the time and
Yeah,
telling them that they're going to go to hell if they do this. And I mean, that's kind of the way I grew up in church. Not every preacher, but I mean, that was I love my grandmother was awesome, but she probably was under the premise if you had a glass of wine, you were going to go to hell, just because that was the way she was raised. And
yeah,
but she was a Christian woman, and I think that turns a lot of people off. But I can tell you here, I'm not perfect. I'm a sinner. I don't use the best language at times. I do a lot of other things that I'm not proud of, and have done a lot of things, but I'm trying to be a little bit better Christian today than I was yesterday. And I think
yeah.
if people can wrap their minds around that, but there's never been a perfect person to walk on this world, and we become so judgmental. And that's not our job. That's God's job to judge, and He knows that we're all imperfect people. I mean, when Adam and Eve made a decision to eat that fruit, we all became sinners at that moment. And yeah, we'd love to all go back and change that moment in time, but it's not happening. So we have to understand it, but we still have to understand that we need to surround ourselves by people that are godly people if we want to continue to push ourselves to be better Christians.
No doubt about that. That is huge. That's something that I mean we both have experienced over this past year is surrounding yourself with people that are going to make you a better human being, and we're lucky enough and fortunate enough to have people in our life like that. You did mention, now that I think about it, just talking about the coaches Bible study, and I mentioned this in my banquet speech, and it just, I mean, I wasn't planning on talking about this at all, but this is just where the Lord has taken me. Um, last it was last preseason, so before the season starts, I know you guys were in a Bible study. I was curious. I walked into to Heath's office one day, and his Bible's on the desk, and he's got a piece of paper in his Bible, and I'm like, oh, I want to see what the coaches are reading, what they're studying. So I open up Heath's Bible, and at the very top of the page, not the Bible page, but you guys had a printout that you were going through. It said Carter Cunningham's mom, and that at that time I had been talking to you in your office about just some things she was struggling with, some tough times she was going through, and I didn't ask for prayers, I didn't know anything of it, and then as I was going down that list on that sheet of paper, it was prayer requests. And so, like, that moment right there for me was like, I literally am getting goosebumps right now talking about it, because I don't know if there's a coaching staff out there. I would like to believe that there is, but a coaching staff out there that is so invested in their players and their relationships. And so that moment right there meant a ton to me. It meant a ton to my family, and that's just something I'll never forget. So I want to say thank you to you guys for doing that. Um, I know
Well,
even
hey, just God working through us. So, I mean, you had mentioned that to me at some point in time, and then in staff Bible study, we're praying for your mom to find that job that she really wanted. I know that that was what the specific prayer was, and it wasn't long after that. I think we were at Liberty,
yeah,
and you looked up in the stands. You told me this story once
yeah.
again. God working through me. When I say working through me, to be able to remember this
Yeah, yeah. I was about to. I
story.
didn't think you remember this.
Yeah, but you looking up, and I think it was, I don't know if it was the Friday night game or the Saturday game, but they both were close games, and she's crying, and you're like, I've actually been playing well. Why is she crying?
Yeah, I was like, I thought I was making her happy.
Yeah. But she had gotten that job opportunity. So
Yeah,
just amazing how God works. And it doesn't always happen on our timetable, as we know.
yeah.
But for that moment to play out was pretty amazing.
Yeah, no doubt. And thank you for remembering that, because that was I'll never forget that moment of, like, I obviously looking into the stands, and I'm like, oh, like, what could this possibly be about? And then after the game, it was tears of joy because prayers were answered. So thank you guys. I wanted to go into to how the Lord brought you back to Greenville. I know you've had quite the journey from Ole Miss to LSU to Notre Dame, just a bunch of different stops, Vandy, UNCW. I wanted you to sort of navigate the path that the Lord has taken you through, and then how it wound up to back to Greenville, North Carolina.
Well, he wanted me to be back here because I wasn't praying to come back to Greenville. For a lot of personal reasons. I probably didn't know it at the time, but it was literally just chase the ladder of success and move up the ladder through coaching. And I started out at Kinston High School, was there for a spring, UNCW for a year. Never really had lived out of the state of North Carolina. Moved to Vanderbilt for a year, then Notre Dame for a year, LSU for 2, UCF for 3, and then Ole Miss for 3. And I had put myself in a situation. God had put myself in a situation to have so much success as a coach, from what the world would say is a great coach. And there was an opening here, and of course, I have a lot of pride in this place for playing for Coach LeClaire, and my best friends in the world were my teammates here at East Carolina. So when the job came open, of course, I was interested, but selfishly, I didn't want to come back and didn't even tell my parents about the job interview I had out in Omaha when East Carolina flew out there, because I wanted to make sure that they were going to support us at a level that we could compete for a national championship. And the thing I would tell you, Carter, is God's kept me here, for sure, and for all the right reasons. Even though when this hard-headed guy that thought he was in control of his life thought he could do it, and I told this story last night at the Wilson Hot Stove. Um, they had a panel of coaches, and they asked the audience to write down questions. And so it was Elliot Avent, the head coach at NC State up there, Mike Fox, the former head coach at the University of North Carolina, Keith Gorman, the head coach at Barton College, and myself. And one of the questions was, what is, your best moments as a coach? And I was like third in line to speak. And, Coach Fox actually talked about he wished he'd have enjoyed the wins more when he
Mm,
was coaching and not thinking about the next thing, which is something that we all battle as coaches, because we're always trying to keep our players hungry and on to the next practice and on to the next game, whether we win or lose, and how we're going to navigate that. And you remember the losses more than you remember the wins at times. And I know I have fell victim to that. I've tried to enjoy it more, but the story I told was the 2016, the regional championship and Travis Watkins walk-off home run. And then we go to Texas Tech and we win game 1. And I'm getting chill bumps telling the story. And the funny part of the story, after we won game 1 at Texas Tech, I'll never forget this. Tim Tadlock, the head coach at Texas Tech, in his post game goes, "They're much better in person than they were on video." And I knew it was such a backhanded compliment. And I'm kind of sitting back laughing, going, I would agree, like we've played really well recently. And then, game 2, we're the home team, and it's the bases loaded. Brady Lloyd, I think it was his 12th at bat of the year. And the only time as a head coach at East Carolina, I've taken my mind and said, hey, we're going to Omaha, because Carter, as you know, when East Carolina has never been, you just don't let yourself go there. I know
yep.
fans go there and start counting outs, but we've had some of the most heartbreaking losses in the history of baseball. Me as a player and now as the head coach of not going there. But when Brady Lloyd hit that ball at the middle, that's the first time and the only time I've ever said, hey, we're going to Omaha, for a split second. And then the ball kicked off the mound. It ricocheted to second base and he flipped it to shortstop. Of course, we lose in the 13th inning, and then we get, beat pretty bad on day 3. But, I told the crowd last night that I couldn't say that immediately. And I don't remember exactly how much time had gone through, but you know, God didn't let that ball go up the middle. That's not me being a loser. It's because he knew that I probably wasn't mature enough not to run for the money for another job opportunity. And, what little legacy we'd have left here as a coaching staff for just being at a place that I loved so much and I cared so much, and be here for 2 years and not even coach your first recruiting class. And, they mentioned just specifically the big leaguers that have played at East Carolina since I've been the head coach here. And, I'd have never coached Alec Burleson. I'd never coached Connor Norby. I'd have never coached Gavin Williams. And, of course, the Carter Cunninghams and everybody else of the world, the Trey Savages. And, man, the pride they have in this place. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know who the next head coach would have been, and it doesn't matter, but I would have left a place that I love, that I poured my heart and soul in as a player, and just for money. I mean,
Yeah.
how shallow is that? So that's actually the story I told, and we had one Pirate fan out there said, "Go Pirates," which I know there's probably some Pirate fans out there. Hey, coach, you might not have wanted the ball to go up the middle, but we wanted the ball to go up the middle.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
and I just tell that story because there's been times that God has kept me here when I didn't want to be here for external reasons, and I'm much more comfortable in my skin now. And us going to the College World Series is still important to me to compete for a national championship. But Carter, for me to sit here and say that I'm going to let that, control my life, do I struggle with it? Yeah, I struggle with it. I
Yeah.
mean, it's human nature not to, as much as our staff and our players work. But um, I know that the big man up top, that's not going to be how he judges me or anybody else down here on this planet.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's I think a revelation you've definitely had more recently, and also I've had that revelation as well. Really investing in prioritizing what is important in life and what truly matters in life. And I know you went on Pastor Aaron's podcast about I don't know a couple months ago now, and you guys really got into some deep conversations just about really being fulfilled in life and how when chasing success and chasing the next best thing, the it runs out. The well runs dry, and fulfillment can really only be found through the Lord. And I think you've experienced that, especially over the past year and a half. You've sort of had that transformation. If you want to touch on that and sort of where God, I mean, God brought you to the low, and then he's now opening your eyes up to really what's important in life and what leaves you fulfilled.
Yeah, Carter. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there
Yeah.
for sure. And I go back to the night before I was on the podcast, and I was so excited that the clock had sprung forward on the Saturday going into the Sunday, and we had to play late Saturday because at Liberty because there was rain earlier in the day.
Mm,
So it takes me like 2, 3 hours to wind down from a game and even try
yeah.
to get a little bit of sleep. And I probably slept for 3 hours that Saturday night going into Sunday. And I was just so excited to get some rest when we got back at like 9 o'clock, and my stomach was bothering me, so I couldn't really sleep. And it's the first time I really felt like the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said that, when you go on this podcast tomorrow, you need to talk about winning being your drug, and not just winning baseball games. I mean, pretty much just trying to win at everything.
Yep.
That I was so and controlling everything, to be honest with you, in my life. Hey, if we do X, Y, and Z, this is going to be the result. I think as athletes and coaches a lot, yeah, you have to work hard, but you're still not totally in control if you believe in God. So, um, I talked about a lot of things I'm not proud of on that podcast for sure. But it actually freed me up as you told a group of people that I actually told our leadership group probably a week before the podcast came out what was going to be on the podcast, because I wanted you guys to hear it from me first and not,
Yep.
hey, go on social media and hear it for the first time about their head coach. And that was important to me, and how things have not necessarily gotten easier since then, because I think Irma, my therapist, told me when you go out and you put your platform in your faith, that's really when the enemy is going to try to attack you. And I think about, even you guys getting baptized on the field where there was some pushback from not many people, but of course, there's somebody out there that you need to separate church and state. And I felt very comfortable. If that's the reason I get fired at East Carolina, then I got fired for a great cause.
Yeah.
And like I said, we don't force religion on anybody, but at the same time, we want them to have an opportunity to grow in their faith, and with sport works and other things. So, but God's brought me to a place. I think it's the first time publicly I ever mentioned, I wanted to have a healthy relationship, and I had to be broken basically to get God to change my heart and work through some things that I went through as youth, some publicly, some not publicly, that made me treat women very poorly throughout all the relationships I had. And I'm actually going to get engaged this fall. And, I'm jumping to the last question that you sent me yesterday. But one thing I would say I never thought my heart could be changed. I never thought I would get married, but God can change your heart. And, you know, Bree, who I'm going to get engaged with, I'll probably embarrass her, but she's got the biggest heart of anybody I've ever known to forgive me for a lot of mistakes that I've made throughout our time knowing each other. And I'm just so grateful that God has allowed her to have that big a heart, because there's a lot of people that would say, "Hey man, you can go get kick rocks." And I would have said, "Yeah, I deserve that."
I wasn't gonna bring that up, but I'm certainly glad you did. Because one of the questions I was going to ask you was like, if there was one thing that outsiders may not know about you, like what would it be? And you responded, "Why don't you answer that question for me?" And so I'm gonna take that time right now and just share the transformation that I've seen in you over the past year. Certainly, when I arrived on campus as a junior from junior college, which was that would have been the fall of 2021. Um, and then seeing how our relationship, and not even our relationship, really just you changing the transformation of your heart, as you mentioned, from the fall of 21 to where it is now. I think that definitely is exactly where the Lord has brought you to. Um, I don't think anybody else could have done it. I mean, you could have, I don't know, you could have found a new friend or girlfriend or whatever. You could have tried out whatever it is in life. You could be searching for answers, but the only answer is Jesus Christ. And I think you experienced that, and I've certainly experienced that as well during my career at East Carolina. So if there was one thing that I wish, you know, outsiders that don't know you personally, it's that he is exactly who he says he is nowadays. There's no more mask. He's extremely open and honest and vulnerable with his players, with his relationships, and that is probably something that is biggest to you is the relationship aspect of not only coaching but now with Bree, with your friends, with your family. That is that's just the biggest transformation that I've seen. But I did want to ask you if there was like one thing that if you could tell a player 5 years ago that played for you that didn't necessarily see this side of you, you know, they probably showed up to practice and you were on them and you were beating them to death and burying them and those things. If there was one thing that a player from 5 years ago would like for them to know, what would that like one thing be?
It would, I would say it always came from a good place.
Yeah.
I've always, the people that are close to me, and you know this now probably more than you even knew it when you played here, but the guys that have played for this program and for us, and I understand the work that they put in and how I challenged them, not just on the baseball field, but in the classroom, in the weight room, in the community, that I'd do anything in the world for them. Like, I'd drop everything today if
Yep.
Jake Agnos calls me, or Lane Hoover calls me, or any of the guys that have played and said, "Hey, coach, I'm in need." I would
Yep.
drop everything I had going on right now, and I would get in my car and I'd do whatever I could do. And I think people see me externally, and I think that's the thing that I struggled with my identity. When you talked about your cup not being full, at some point in time, it's going to run dry when you
Yep.
put your stuff into the world, and it doesn't matter how much money you make, how many wins you get, and that's really where I got to in the fall of 22 after a lot of sequences of events that were
Yep.
not positive in my life, and just not getting that adrenaline rush anymore. It's like, well, why am I even doing this? I mean, we've won as many games as we're the third most wins of any program in the entire country since 2018. And, winning's not doing it for me anymore. And chasing girls is not doing it for me anymore. And just being in a very dark place. And mental health's real. I would tell people I was embarrassed to go see my therapist the first time. And really, the only reason I opened up, because I was in such a low place in my life, and but I didn't want our players to see it. I didn't want nobody to know about it. Was embarrassed to get out of my car, but my therapist connection with one of my ex-girlfriends, because as Carter knows, I only trust people that are in that circle. And because she trusted her, just being a friend, that opened the door for me to have the courage to walk through the door and go see her. And but there's a lot of people out there that needs to go see therapists, and it's not shame. And I think that's what the devil does is shame, guilt, fear, anxiety comes from, the devil. It doesn't come from God. God doesn't just plant that in your life. It comes from the enemy. And it's a real thing. But I'm so thankful that, people that are close to me see me as Cliff Godwin, the human, and not
Yeah.
Coach Godwin, because all coaches are humans
Yeah.
and they can say it doesn't bother them, but I don't read the social media stuff, but it'll get back to you the way people think about you. And it's like, man, the amount of time that we invest here, it's not, we're not trying to lose. I promise you, our players aren't trying
Yeah.
to lose.
Yeah.
It's much more than that. And you know this, I mean, the losses hurt. Tracy wrote me a note after we lost this year and he says, it should hurt. You invest a lot. If if you didn't invest a lot, it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
And that means a lot coming from a guy that played here and being one of my best friends and understanding that. Like, hey man, if you decide to get in that arena, you put yourself at risk that it's not going to turn out the right way. And you could have done a
Yeah.
lot of things the right way. And you and I talked about this the other day. I mean, when you hit that ball against Evansville on Monday, like I knew it was going out. Like
Yeah.
I'd seen that ball hit off your bat before, and then I felt this breeze hit me in the face, and I thought, "Oh no, no, not right now. This
Yeah.
is not the time for the breeze to be blowing in from left center field." And it did, and even like Nowak's ball, like I mean, bases loaded, and in my 11 years as a head coach, I've never seen a ball hit like that where
No.
nobody really knows. Did he catch it? Did he not catch it? And, we only score one run with the bases loaded and no outs. And
Yeah.
if we score two or three, the game's different.
Yeah.
And that's not a losing mentality. That's just the fact that I don't know. We'll find out 5, 10, 15 years from now why the ball that you hit didn't go out and why the team that ends up knocking down the door is the team that does it.
Yeah.
Um, and we all wish we had the crystal ball, but only the big man up top's got the crystal ball about
Yeah.
when things are going to happen.
Yeah, no doubt. I am a firm believer that when ECU does break down that door to Omaha, it's like it's just gonna make perfect sense. Like it's gonna be like, all right, God, like you had this all along. We should have never doubted. Obviously, do we want it now? Did I want to do it? Did Jake Agnes want to do it? Of 1,000%. We weren't trying to lose. We wanted it badly. Each and every single day we showed up to the field. But like you said, that's just not up for us to determine, or it's not into our control. And so when it does happen, it's just going to be like, wow, that makes total sense. So you mentioned really just not having your identity in baseball. I was really, before I was this into my faith, like before I was really a Christian, I always tried to just pride myself on Carter Cunningham, the human being, and then Carter Cunningham, the baseball player. And as I've grown in my faith, I've definitely experienced what that means. Like I didn't know God at that time as I was saying that, but now I'm like, okay, it makes a lot of sense to me about really being a human being and a Christian first, and then a baseball player second. And I think that's what a lot of people on the outside may not see, and specifically in athletes, but you could even relate that to big business owners. Like, oh, they probably have it all together. They got a perfect life with all the money and everything that they could ever want. But that's just not reality a lot. And I think you advocate for mental health, and that is huge. Like the all of these things are real things that every human being struggles with. And I think a lot of the times it's like if you're put together, or you're the big athlete, the star athlete, or the business owner, then it just gets swept under the rug because you have everything put together and you don't need money, or your happiness can be bought through money, and that just couldn't be farther from the truth. So I just want to say thank you for sort of advocating for that. And I've experienced you really preach that to the players that you coach because you went through it. And I know as players we just appreciated your vulnerability in that moment and in that time. So um, I wanted to ask you if there was like a specific moment in your life over the past year and a half, or in your walk with God, that sort of changed the trajectory of your walk with God. If there was like one thing, was it the podcast, like whatever it may be, it's your time.
I would say obviously Mike Amen walking in those glass doors in
Yeah.
the spring of 2020 was a monumental moment in my life. And not that at times people walk in your life and you don't need them. And I've said this a lot. Like I didn't need Mike Amen in that moment necessarily because I felt like I had everything under control. But God knew I was going to need Mike Amen, hey, down the road. And
Yeah,
there's
I
angels
needed them.
there. That's right. That's right. And I mean, Carter Cunningham stayed an ECU baseball player because Mike Amen helped out with NIL to help offset some of your expenses from being an out of state
Yep.
non scholarship player. And how grateful we both are for
Yep.
that opportunity.
Yeah.
But I think that people and Mike, spoke about in a podcast the first time. It was in the fall of 22 when I was going through my dark time, and I was actually in my hyperbaric chamber in my house listening to Matt Mollison and Mike Aman, and Mike talked about a very low moment in his life where he thought his family was going to be better off with the $100,000 life insurance policy than him living in debt, and how he had contemplated ending his life, which
Yep.
we all see Mike now, like how would that guy?
Yep.
But that's an angel on earth to be able to be vulnerable enough to tell people that. But I text him in that hyperbaric chamber, and I'll never forget, and said, "You probably saved somebody's life today," and he was actually helping save mine.
Yeah. At that
But you got
time.
people, yeah, at that time for sure, and the podcast was definitely freeing for me. But then I worried about my parents. My parents did the best they could. You know, and my dad's dad died when he was 15, and um, his mom started dating too soon in his mind. So just how his relationship was fractured with his mom because of his dad passing away, which none of us can imagine unless you've been through it, what it's like with your dad passing away at 15. I mean, even Jake and Zach had Nico until they were in college, which not that that's easier, but they're a little bit older, and they got more years with them with Nico than my dad got with his dad. But how those moments, if you're not able to navigate them, through your faith, and how that can continue a cycle on. And I
Yep.
told my parents, because I just didn't want to be critical of them. I'm just trying to break the cycle. Like they did get divorced. They didn't want to. It just that was life. We're all sinners, so that was something that they couldn't navigate. And, I held on to that for way too long and didn't try to get help and process it. And it helped me by just talking about it. And hopefully, the females I didn't treat the right way can understand that more, if that makes sense. And hey, it wasn't intentional, but I just wouldn't let females get close enough to me. But thank God for the podcast. And people have made a big deal about me being so vulnerable. And I'm not perfect, and I'm just trying to help somebody else that
Yep.
is having to navigate a divorce as an adolescent, or going off to college, or their marriage or their relationship's not good because they had a divorce. And obviously the mental health stuff, I hope I can, because of my platform as being the head coach. And you talked about separating. I always wanted people to look at me as Cliff Godwin and not think of me as whatever status I had, but I actually wasn't living that, if that makes sense. And
Yep.
I try to live that. I mean, last night being at the Wilson Hot Stove, like I got an award. I don't even, it's not even comfortable for me to get awards anymore because
Yeah.
I know it's not really me, it's God, and it's
Yeah.
players, and it's coaches, and it's everybody else that has poured their heart and soul into this place.
Yeah. No doubt. And going back to, I mean, when you shared the podcast with the team and you said, "Hey, these things are going to be said," this is what I talked about on the podcast, and there was certainly some deep things that you said you didn't even expect to talk about, but that is exactly where the Lord really brought you to that day. And I just remember saying, like, and I think just for listeners out there, is this is important for them to hear. Like, the more you try to hold things in and like suppress it deep down, like the more that thing has a grip on you. But once you like publicly profess that to somebody, it could be a stranger. As long as if you just get it out of your mouth, out of your heart, and it's out there now, it no longer has a grip on you. And so that is something that you experienced. Like it was like just a weight off of your shoulders. I feel like after that podcast, where um, you no longer had to just, it wasn't bottled up inside anymore. Like it was, honestly, you said it to the public. You didn't even just say it to some close friends. You said it publicly, and now that was just so freeing, and the freedom that liberation that comes with it. And I think a lot of listeners out there could actually utilize that and benefit from that, about just finding somebody to just go have a cup of coffee, like I said in my first episode, and just get stuff off your chest, and get it out there, because that means it will no longer have a grip over your life. And so I wanted to just
Well,
wrap up. No, go ahead.
yeah, last thing, and I would say that's the best thing about Mike A. Man. I should say the best things, a lot of great things, but one of the best things is no matter what I would tell him in the fall of 22, there was never any judgment. There
Yeah,
wasn't, wow, you probably shouldn't have done that,
yeah,
back in your earlier days. And he knows pretty much everything that God knows, because I would just dump my life onto him, and he never would judge. And I would tell you, if you are a mentor to somebody, you have to understand where they've come from, and
yeah,
the judgment piece will hinder them for being so vulnerable to you. And you know, one of our teammates in that circle that day said something to us that none of us knew,
yeah,
and it gave him a platform to feel free to go, I don't even know where this is going to lend me with the future of ECU baseball, but
yeah,
at this point in time, I need to say what I'm doing and what I'm about, and for us to just be a support system there for them and go, hey, we're here to help. There's no judgment here, but we want to help you, because if you keep trending this way, it's probably not going to be good for you or your family and your
yeah,
kids. So, um, and the fact that he's doing better today because
yeah,
of us just being willing to support him.
yeah. That's it. I mean, that's exactly what life is all about. And I'll never forget that moment. And like, I think it's not really up for us to determine like the fruit that we may bear, but like you look now, and he's in a much better place than he was that day when he shared that with us, solely based on him just sharing that with a group. And it came out of left field, but it was like, wow, that's some deep stuff, and he needed to do it, and he needed to share that, and look where he is now. So definitely, you just can't walk through life alone. Like, you have to have a circle, you have to have a group, you have to have mentors, you have to have people around you making you a better human being. I feel like I just touch on that in every episode, but I'm trying to get that point across here. I just wanted to wrap up with the last question about really just what God has done in your life recently, and then sort of where you may see Him taking you towards the future.
Well, I think the biggest thing is to get to a place where I can have a healthy relationship with Bree. I mean,
Hmm.
that was something that I never thought I would be able to do, and not that it's perfect. I'm definitely not the perfect boyfriend by any means, but I'm working on it. I'm working on to being better at that as well, and putting her first instead of my job and my career, which that's what I've always done.
Yeah,
But that's the biggest thing for me, is just some of the things I really struggled with sin wise. I've been able to navigate better, but I would also tell people it's still not easy. It's not
yeah,
like you have this switch and it's
yeah,
just like, okay, I don't even think about these things anymore,
yeah,
because that's not what the world's about. I mean, the world always pushes you to do worldly things instead of what's in the Bible. And just encourage people to read the Bible. I mean, I'm not great at that either. Carter's way better at remembering Bible verses than I am. But the more you can dive into the Word, the better that you will be as a Christian. And surround yourself by Bible study groups, church, people that are like-minded, and it will help you push yourself in your faith.
yeah. No doubt. Well, I can't thank you enough for the time taken out of your day. I know you're always busy. You're always getting pulled in 1,000 different directions. So I just want to say thank you for hopping on the podcast. I know somebody out there is going to listen to it, and not that it really matters to you, but they're probably going to have a different perspective on you. But I think more importantly, they're going to have a different perspective on life and how they view their walk with God, which at the end of the day is exactly why this podcast was started. So I just can't thank you enough, Coach.
Hey, an honor, Carter, an honor to be up here, and I thank God that He brought you into my life. And I had no idea what we were getting our hands, when we got you, but so thankful for that, and just what you have done in this community to this point, and you're going to continue to do great things. So keep letting God pour into you, brother.
Yes, sir. Join us next Sunday, we have Paige Aman, Mike's wife, joining the show for episode 4. She has a phenomenal testimony and obviously is the better half of Mike Aman. So be on the lookout for that. Until then, take care and God bless.